Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 35 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we deep dive into June of 1969 and the end of the 1969 US tour. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Sunday, the 1st of June, Noel Redding. We thought we'd relax by going horse riding before the gig, but when we got to the stables, there was a terrible scene with the owner screaming, "F off, you hairy lot," resulting in our fat mattress roadie threatening him, and everyone feeling terrible. Later that evening at 7 p.m., with support act, Fat Mattress, and in front of an 8,000-strong crowd, the experience returns to the WAIKIKI Shell, Honolulu for the free concert, promised as a result of the equipment problems which plagued the previous Friday night's shortened performance. Concert setlist: Foxy Lady, Red House, Room Full of Mirrors, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, Purple Haze, Foxy Lady and others. Noel Redding wrote in his diary, "The Fat Mattress gig went over very well." Leonard Lueras, for the Honolulu Advertiser, the 9th of June 1969, wrote, "Was it the poetry, the velvet gold bell-bottoms, or the chewed guitar strings that turned on some 23,000 people last week? Or was it just that freaky Negro-Cherokee-Mexican fellow from Seattle, Jimi Hendrix, blew the Diamond Head end of Waikiki out in style last Sunday? Romantic couples on Queen's Surf Beach gazed at a full moon as his sounds nearly flattened in rolling surf, and I swear that the music was bouncing off Diamond Head and back into my head. Out he walked in Navajo jewelry. He wears 2 turquoise rings and a squaw necklace, a puffy lavender voile shirt, and those beautiful gold bell-bottoms, and all over the place on his arms, his right leg and around his forehead were sashes of every color. Skinny Jimmy strolled up to the mic in kaleidoscope grandeur, smiled a funny squiggly smile and said, 'It's so much fun playing guitar.' And his black and white Fender did the rest. So, what do you call it? Jazz acid, funk rock, or electric flow? About a year ago, Jimmy called it progressive rock, but he's changed since then. Get it on. I am on, he assured his audience. And on he was, through a lil purple haze, some voodoo child and a bit of Foxy Lady. When it was over, though, Jimmy forgot about involvement and all that jazz. Very businesslike, he left 8,000 people clapping and asking for more, laid his guitar down on an amp, and was gone in a black limousine even before the clapping was over. I felt sorry for the people out in the shell who were waiting for more, but that was okay. Think of the thousands at Madison Square Garden or the Hollywood Bowl who stood and waited while he whisked away. Who cares? It wasn't a usual Hawaiian experience. Steve Moore for Young Hawaii, the 15th of June 1969, wrote, "Sunday was pretty great. For one thing, the Fat Mattress got it together by Sunday and was very fine. And it is a good balance to Hendrix's virtuoso guitar sound because it is definitely a group thing. The last number they did, and I can't remember the name of it, was first-rate stuff, and they were duly appreciated, which put the people in the right mood for Hendrix, and it seems that that is important for him. Sunday was a jazzer from the start. Ask a friend if you like about the etymology of jazz, because that is where Hendrix is, and was. I didn't see too much difference in what he's doing now and what he did last year, but when you think about it, the business of changing and developing, as with Dylan and the Beatles and the Stones, is essentially a white process. The bluesmen don't go through that. They play blues now. They always have played blues, and they will always play blues. Maybe they will get better at certain licks, but they don't change too much. The difference may be that for them it is a lifestyle, and for the whites a gig. Hendrix looks almost frustrated as he plays. I think he would be happier playing with ball-peen hammers instead of a pick, but even then he can't milk any more sound out of that one guitar than he does. And it really is a gas to hear him use what he has available. All the distortion becomes as musical as the straight stuff, which prompts the old question about what is music and what isn't. Anything you can get behind is music. Of what he does, I like Foxy Lady and Red House best, I guess. Red House because it's so extremely different from anything else he does and shows best his roots. He also plays a good knife lick in it without the knife. It is thoroughly down-home blues. Lady, because it is such a good microcosm of what he is, eroticism rampant. In fact, he strikes me as the highwayman in that poem about Bess, the landlord's daughter, with all the chicks in the world as Bess. Except that Hendrix ends up shooting down the sheriff instead of the other way round, as with his dedication to the plainclothes and other goofballs in the audience. Do you ever watch the cops during these things? And there were plenty to watch at this one. Talk about strange. They stand around kind of incredulous about the whole thing and I think confused. They are confused because there is a tremendous amount of violent sound and concentration, ingredients with which they identify, but here the motivation is love and not busting heads, read as either hitting crania with sticks or incarcerating dope fiends, and they are lost. So the next time you see one of our protectors scratching his head, just go up and say hello and wish him a pleasant evening. Maybe tell him he looks nice in blue, or give him a lie. It's probably what he needs most. What started in disaster then ended up in triumph, for the audience as well as the players, because how often do 8,000 get a show blown out from under them and just go away calmly? With rational people it's possible, and because they did it, they were rewarded with a mind-blower, if we may. Or as a friend said, I'm deaf out of both of my ears. Tom Hewlett of Concerts West recalled, the venue was overfilled, which is why, in my opinion, there are no more rock shows at the Waikiki Shell. We were paranoid. Security was paranoid because everybody had heard what had happened on Friday, came to the gate and said that they had lost their ticket stub, so we let everybody in. The crowd spilled over into the park behind the Shell. Jimmy said to let them in free, and he was brilliant on stage that night. One audience member stated, I came back Sunday and again sat with friends in general admission. That was the best concert. I remember that because Jimmy was trying to make up for the Friday night, and so he was into it. While another concert attendee going by the name of Byron had this to say, we had seats right in front. Jimmy's energy was astonishing. Well, we were already pretty well launched by the time we got there, and Jimmy just took us to another realm. The overall effect was like being under an avalanche of sound, an avalanche which just kept coming, wave after wave. He was like a relentless cosmic fire hose. It was so loud that I was sure they could hear it in Tahiti. Anyway, there was a third show, and it was a killer. By the end of the 3 days, I was just wasted from no sleep, tripping and partying around the concerts. Monday, the 2nd of June. While still in Honolulu, Jimmy goes on a shopping spree in the morning, buying some things from the Wizard clothing store and some cassettes from Records Hawaii. According to Univibes, the International Hendrix magazine, Mike Kelly, shop owner Records Hawaii, remembered, we were the first freestanding record store in Honolulu. We opened on the 8th of November 1968, on Kapiolani Boulevard. The story really isn't exciting other than the fact that we were selling cassettes at that time, 4 tracks, 8 tracks, reel-to-reel and albums. So we had all of those different configurations of albums. And Jimi Hendrix came in by himself, and everybody else recognized him. He was just thumbing through, looking at cassettes. And I thought that it was odd that he would purchase his own cassettes. He was kind of leaning on the counter looking at the cassettes, and once in a while I was looking over there. We didn't bother him too much, but he seemed to nod out once in a while. No, he wasn't really with it. And who knows if it was drug-induced, lack of sleep, or what it was. Later that day, the Experience fly from Honolulu International Airport to Los Angeles, California, Jimmy staying at Beverly Rodeo Hyatt House, 360 North Rodeo Drive, Beverly Hills, California. Noel then flies on to New York, and then on to London with his Fat Mattress bandmates, and Eric Dillon, drummer with Fat Mattress, gets thrown off the flight for being drunk. Saturday, the 7th of June. While in Beverly Hills, Jimmy composes the lyrics to the song Valleys of Neptune, and at some point during the day he is interviewed by Nancy Carter. Sunday, the 8th of June. Jimmy is interviewed by Jerry Hopkins for Rolling Stone magazine, published July 12, 1969. It is during this interview that Jimmy states for the first time that Billy Cox will be his future bass player. Over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, Jimmy works in the studio of Wally Heider Recording in Hollywood, mixing sessions for the song Stars Spangled Banner and I Don't Live Today, along with mixing session for a proposed Jimi Hendrix Experience live album, one ultimately unreleased during Jimmy's lifetime. Between Friday 13th and Tuesday 17th of June, Hendrix is believed to have jammed with various artists, including the Blues Image, the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band, at the nightclub named in their honor, The Experience, including one evening with Lord Sutch as audience member. Thursday, the 19th of June. At Toronto's Old City Hall Courthouse, Jimmy attended a preliminary hearing before Judge Robert Taylor, who ordered him to return to court on December 8, 1969, when he will face trial by jury on 2 counts of possession of heroin and hashish. Bail is maintained at $10,000. The final verdict of the trial will be handed down on December 10, 1969. Listed in the court docket as James M. Hendrix, he appeared in court for his preliminary hearing, wearing a black ruffled shirt, black bell-bottom pants, and black boots. About 50 teenagers filled the small courtroom. Mervyn Wilson, a customs officer at Toronto International Airport, testified that he found 4 packages in a small bottle in Hendrix's flight bag when the singer arrived in Toronto on May 3rd. Mr. Wilson said 3 of the packets contained a white powder and the 4th was empty. He said he also found an aluminum tube with a brownish substance on the tip. The court heard that the RCMP analyzed the white powder as heroin and the brownish substance as hashish. While in Toronto, Jimi is interviewed by Richie York for the Toronto Globe and Mail, the Montreal Star and the Los Angeles Times, published September 7, 1969. Later that night, Jimi flies from Lester B. Pearson International Airport, Toronto to Los Angeles, where he returns to his penthouse suite at the Beverly Rodeo Hyatt in Beverly Hills, while Noel Redding arrives back in Los Angeles from London. Upon arrival, he also checks into the Beverly Rodeo Hyatt, then later that evening, jams at the Experience nightclub with Jim Marshall on drums and Larry Coryell on guitar. Friday the 20th of June, Newport 69, San Fernando Valley State College, Devonshire Downs, California. The Experience plays before an impressive 50,000-strong audience, earning a record $100,000 for the performance. Concert set list. Stone Free and drum solo, Are You Experienced? The Sunshine of Your Love, Fire, Getting My Heart Back Together Again, Red House, Foxy Lady, Like a Rolling Stone, Voodoo Child, Slight Return, and Purple Haze. According to the Hendrix Forum website, the penultimate concert of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, Newport has a very bad reputation. Biographers generally focus more on the noxious atmosphere and the incidents that punctuated the performance than on the music itself. It is also interesting to note that no excerpt from this concert has, to date, appeared on any official album. Noel Redding later said that when he entered Jimi's backstage caravan before the concert, the latter was surrounded by Black Panther activists, and that Hendrix was pale. Noel Redding asked them what they were doing in their dressing room and demanded they leave, after which Jimi thanked him. Jimi's mood had reason to be gloomy as the day before. He had gone to a preliminary hearing for his arrest for possession of heroin in Toronto. Early on, we clearly hear a spectator shout, "Effing asshole," to another member of the audience, leading to a negative ambience from the start, remembering that Jimi hated playing for an audience that wasn't listening. The Experience begins the concert with a version of Stone Free, which is simply excellent. After an energetic singing part, Jimi launches into an intense and quality solo. Mitch Mitchell then plays a drum solo of around 2 minutes, punctuated by the first notes of the American anthem after 1.5 minutes. Jimi then resumes his solo where he left off, even touching on the theme of Third Stone from the Sun at one point. Without transition, the group continues with Are You Experienced?, of which this is the final version. Jimi succeeds in reproducing on rhythm guitar a rendering surprisingly close to that of the piano of the original version. After a very successful version, Jimi continues with a long solo, impressive in creativity. Playing in a very intense register at first, he demonstrates remarkable melodic inventiveness, playing wonderfully on harmonic tensions. Jimi then launches into an a cappella in the spirit of Woodstock improvisation, before taking up the rhythm of Are You Experienced?, without ever stopping, varying around it wah-wah features like Little Wing. Jimi skillfully restarts the tempo, helped by Mitch Mitchell, and takes up the theme of Stone Free to conclude it immediately. The Experience continues with Sunshine of Your Love, at a fairly heavy tempo. He gives way to Noel Redding, who plays a solo varying around the same elements. The Experience moves directly into an energetic, rather successful version of Fire. Unfortunately, Jimi encounters problems with uncontrollable feedback during his last solo, and he doesn't sing the entire lyrics of Fire. Yeah, we hope that we're not playing for a bunch of animals, so try not to act like you are, okay? Relax, okay? Because you're making us really tense. Yes, it's you I'm talking to. Yes, it's you I'm talking to. Yes, okay, I'm trying to play the guitar there, thanks. Don't do that, man. Jimi begins to introduce the theme of the next song, while punctuating his speech with guitar licks, but interrupts himself, The crowd continuing to be agitated, even violent. You're strangling each other, that's all, F off. He adds that it's a shame to see these people who despair over anything, then tells the guy or guys to get out. The experience then begins, Get My Heart Back Together. It is a unique version, largely influenced by the turn of events. Jimi even improvises new lyrics. It's a shame you don't love me anymore. Too bad you all act like clowns. The central solo is not very saturated. Jimi plays blues features which he modulates with wah-wah. Jimi sings the last verse without any conviction. He skips 2/3 of the lyrics. He then launches into a final solo where he immediately regains all his intensity. Jimi rarely plays 2 slow blues in a row. A little against all expectations, it is a successful version of Red House, where Hendrix sings particularly well. The second verse is superb, illuminated by Jimi's vocal nuances. Jimi's solo is relatively short. It is only composed of 2 cycles of 12 measures. Jimi plays fast and nervous phrases in clean sound during the first, while he plays long, very saturated sustained notes in the second, where Mitch doubles the tempo. Jimi modifies the lyrics of the last verse, and continues directly with the introductory feedback of Foxy Lady. Yeah, this is dedicated to all the teeny weenies out there. The one in the 4th row with the yellow pants on, yeah you. Jimi improvises new lyrics again. You make me want to get up and to puke. The version is not catastrophic, but the solo takes on water and Jimi skips part of the lyrics. Followed by Like a Rolling Stone, which is the last version ever played by Jimi, and one of the least impressive. He only sings the first verse without much conviction and is content with a few variations during the second verse. Yeah, none of us are ready now. None of us in the whole world now, thank you. The experience then attacks Voodoo Child, Slight Return. From the first bars, Jimi tells the crowd that this is a black militant song, never forget it. Is this related to the Noel Redding anecdote reported in the introduction? The title does not particularly suffer from the aggressive atmosphere. Without being unforgettable, this version of Voodoo Child, Slight Return, remains correct. Jimi seems to have some technical problems after the second verse. He unsurprisingly lets Mitch Mitchell fill in with a drum solo. It is Purple Haze that has the privilege of ending the concert. Despite problems with uncontrolled feedback and partially skipped lyrics, it is rather a good version, due to the energy that the group shows, even in adversity. In the end, a very disjointed concert, alternating the best, the first 2 titles and Red House, and the worst, Get My Heart Back Together, and Like a Rolling Stone. While Noel Redding recalled, the Newport Pop Festival at the Devonshire Downs was billed as the biggest festival to date, a 3-day venture staged in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and featuring, among many others, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Booker T and the MGs, Eric Burdon and War, Steppenwolf and Three Dog Night. We were scheduled to appear on the 20th of June 1969. Jeffrey was geared up for this one the same way he was geared up for the Monkees tour. This was all good business, our biggest return for the least amount of effort. All he had to do was make sure we were standing on stage for one short set in front of miles and miles of audience. The backstage area was a circus, with rows of caravans for sideshows and groups. A sea of colorful and happy people milled outside our wire mesh enclosure and watched us in our cage. A helicopter dropped us off backstage, the only possible way in. I scored some grass and headed for our caravan. The interior of the caravan contained a world quite different from the outside, where a hippie peace-love vibe prevailed. The caravan was packed with about 8 black heavies, who dwarfed Jimi. He looked petrified, and I was chilled to the bone by his appearance. I don't know what they were on about, but Jimi looked so relieved to see me it looked pathetic. I told them to get the F out of our dressing room. I didn't know anything about politics or the black equation. With the caravan cleared, Jimi was a bit shaky and somewhat withdrawn and troubled. I settled him down and we relaxed with the grass. After a couple of drinks and a snort, we were perfectly primed and ready to go at 8. Then, we were rescheduled to 10:30. That was the worst thing about festivals. You never went on when you were scheduled, but you had to be there and ready at the appointed time, having planned your high and your energy levels all day correspondingly. When we did go on, Jimi just couldn't pull himself together. I don't know whether the pressure was internal or external, but I suspect the latter. He played with his back to the audience for 20 minutes and walked off. Maybe it was just his way of saying to Jeffrey, to the heavies, and maybe even to the fans, "Look, I'm terrible. You don't want me. Leave me alone." Whatever it was, I never did get used to having 1/3 of the group walk off the stage in mid-set. I was angry. I split to the hotel instantly without trying to see Jimmy and passed out. Next day the pressure was on for us to make up for the short set, but I was sick of the whole thing. Jimmy decided to go on with Buddy Miles on Sunday, when they did a good jam with Eric Burdon. The fans and promoters were happy, but it was a bit late to my mind. Mitch Mitchell remembered. Our next date, June 20th, Newport Pop Festival, Devonshire Downs, outside LA. God, what a tricky gig. It was the first gig, I think. There we were apparently being paid giant wads of cash. One gig, 45 minutes, and the guarantee was, well, over 100 grand. We knew this, and it was obviously on our minds. Not that it was obscene, just a bit odd. I remember the gig. We got there about 9 o'clock, got on about 11, having spent a couple of hours in the caravan with an even greater than usual number of hangers-on. I don't know, but I think somebody spiked Jimmy, or maybe he had taken something of his own, and then someone had spiked him on top of that. It was a disaster. I kept thinking, this is weird. All this money. It was almost like, how much per minute am I getting? So that, plus Hendrix's state, added up to a terrible performance. Mitch goes on to add that, on the drive back to LA from the Newport Pop Festival, Jimmy decided to go back, bless his heart, to play again. Not for any money or anything, just because he felt he wanted to make up for it. I didn't, not sure why, I just didn't want to visit the site again. Anyway, Jimmy went back on the Sunday and jammed with various people, including Buddy Miles. He did the right thing as a musician. I wish I had done it as well. The other aspect of this is that our first gig in the States, Monterey, had been a festival, but it had been well organized, and I enjoyed it. Newport Pop was probably the first of what was to become the norm for festivals, in that the whole thing was like an army maneuver. The spirit had gone out of those kind of events. Saturday, the 21st of June, and Jimmy participates in a jam session with the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. Sunday, the 22nd of June. At Newport 69, Jimmy participates in a jam session with Buddy Miles drums, Brad Campbell on bass, and the other members of the Full Tilt Boogie Band, Tracy Nelson vocals, and the other members of Mother Earth and Eric Burdon. There is no record of Janis Joplin and her band performing at the festival, but as they were recording their KBB LP in nearby Los Angeles between the 16th and 23rd, 2 members of her group turned up to jam. Jimmy and Buddy prominently featured Buddy's We Got to Live Together, possibly written for this occasion, with Bob Arthur on bass. No doubt an answer to the racist abuse at the Experience show 2 days earlier. He only featured this song once more, as the finale at his all-black artists show at the Fillmore East with the Band of Gypsies. While Kevin Roderick, in a piece titled Hendrix at Devonshire Downs for the website LA Observed, described the festival this way. Hendrix had been the headline act at the opening Friday night of Newport 69, the first big rock festival held in Los Angeles. He played so poorly, reportedly due to an LSD-spiked drink, that he vowed to return to the stage on Sunday. His set with Buddy Miles, Eric Burdon, and a bunch of other name musicians lasted a couple of hours, and prompted Times critic Pete Johnson to write that people seated near the stage may have heard the best performance of their lives. Others, not so much. Newport 69 had a great lineup, the Byrds, Marvin Gaye, Joe Cocker, Ike and Tina Turner, and many others, but it lacked a great sound system. Also missing were food, water, bathrooms, and other accommodations for the estimated 200,000 fans who partied at Devonshire and Zelza in Northridge over the weekend of June 20th, 1969. Most didn't pay the $7 admission, but either hopped the fence, eluding the swinging clubs and chains of Hell's Angels and LA street racers who provided security, or danced in the streets. At night, they crashed in surrounding front yards. Buffy St. Marie urged everyone to stay happy, but on Sunday afternoon, police trying to clear the suburban neighborhood met with rocks and bottles. 15 cops and more than 300 civilians needed medical treatment. Shocked city fathers banned future rock festivals, but 2 months later, Woodstock pushed Newport 69 out of the headlines. Nashville artist Tracy Nelson, who was on stage with Mother Earth during the Hendrix Jam, told me a few years ago that many of the musicians who were there still talk about Devonshire Downs, as the occasion is known. The Sunday performance was to be, for all intent and purposes, the Band of Gypsies, obsessive rhythms, Jimmy Buddy question and answer style exchanges on vocals, etc., and provided fans with an opportunity of hearing Jimmy play songs other than the standard set lists from the US 1969 tour with the Experience. concert setlist, Earth vs. Space, with excerpts from Gypsy Eyes, Keep on Groovin', Red House, and Machine Gun. The Things I Used to Do, Jam, with excerpts from Train Kept a Rollin', Power of Soul Earth Blues, Get My Heart Back Together, Voodoo Child, Slight Return. Fast Jam, with excerpts from Sunshine of Your Love, Come On, Part 1, Star Spangled Banner, Then, We Gotta Live Together and Feel So Good. In The Los Angeles Image, a review by Gene Rogalski and R.E. Maxson. If last week's Newport Pop Festival proved anything, it proved one thing for sure. Hendrix is the unexcelled master of the electric guitar. Sunday's program, when Hendrix was at his zenith, was the best of the 3 days shows and got the best audience response. Included was an unprecedented 2-hour jam session, which may have artistically been the greatest achievement in live rock history. Among the participants were Eric Burdon and his review, the Janis Joplin review, without Janis, Tracy Nelson and some members of Mother Earth, and Hendrix. Janis couldn't be missed less. Hendrix more than made up for his weak performance of Friday night. In fact, he got carried away. About 25 minutes before the jam ended, Buddy Miles announced, "We don't want to overdo it." But Jimmy apparently wasn't listening. He played and played and played, until, at least it's rumored, his plug was pulled. This is the kind of thing you always hear about but never get to see. The participants obviously hadn't practiced, but that can be overlooked when you're watching some of the greatest jam together. What adjective can be applied to such a performance? Hendrix came across with perhaps the greatest playing in all of rock's existence, and maybe even the greatest accomplishment ever achieved with the electric guitar. He seems to know the instrument and its nearly limitless possibilities better than any electric guitarist who has ever lived. He played for nearly the whole 2 hours, stopping only now and then to let other performers lay down some business. And he never repeated a riff. His creativity was awing. Goddamn Yank, speak English boy. As he switched styles from blues to jazz to rock to rhythm to whatever, all with ridiculous ease. Hendrix was Wes Montgomery and B.B. King and Eric Clapton, and you name it all wrapped up in one package of artistic fury as he demonstrated his ability to play anyone's genre and do it better than the best practitioner of each style he attempted. His use of the wah-wah pedal, tape loops, no tape loops actually, and other relatively new features of electric guitar playing, in a way which was creative beyond belief, demonstrates his thorough wisdom of the instrument and all its present-day possibilities. There has probably never been electric guitar talent as promising as Hendrix, and if he never does anything right again, his Sunday performance will stand as a great fulfillment of that talent. The man is nothing less than a genius. The performance Hendrix wrought from his instrument dwarfed just about everything else that has gone clown, and he easily blew the considerable talent which was on the stage with him right off whenever he wanted to. The performance inspired in this writer the most compelling experience of total euphoric ecstasy ever derived from music. Hendrix's eye-challenging finger speed and formidable technical dexterity, his continual flow of out-of-time ideas, his peerless phrasing, his flawless sense of taste and timing, and the famous aura he communicates, all molded in perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime fusion with the ultimate inspiration all musicians dream of receiving during a jam session. It was as if Hendrix had broken through to the most profound musical dimension available to mortals and was being guided by the perfect, instantaneous teachings of improvisational composing's most exalted spirit. Man, Hendrix was playing out of his mind. Monday 23rd and Tuesday 24th sees Jimmy jamming with Johnny Winter and Buddy Miles and Eric Burdon, Jack Cassidy and Noel Redding respectively, at the club The Experience. Noel recalled, "Waiting it out in LA for the Denver concert to come round, I ran into Jimmy often in the Experience Club. We had pleasant general talks about business and the future. He'd often say in public that we should be splitting the Experience income in thirds as we were all working equally hard. But he had no say." Friday, the 27th of June, Wichita State University, Henry Leavitt Arena. A mini-riot broke out when people showed up to buy tickets on the day of the show and found out that it had been cancelled. The Wichita Eagle, June 26th edition, reported, "The Jimi Hendrix Experience scheduled for Friday at Wichita State University's Henry Leavitt Arena has been cancelled due to lack of pre-sale tickets. According to Ron Webster Limited, the Wichita organization sponsoring the Hendrix concert, the problem arose when ticket sales failed to meet the $20,000 minimum required by the concert's funder, Union National Bank. Hendrix's fee for the one-night stand was $30,000. We had to convince him, Webster said. He usually gets much more than that. Sunday the 29th of June, Denver Pop Festival, Mile High Stadium, Denver, Colorado, with support acts, Three Dog Night and Joe Cocker, the final concert of the 1969 US tour, and the last official concert of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. The Experience's final performance with Noel Redding at the three-day event held at Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. It was marked by the intervention of the police who, at one point, fired tear gas at the public. The Experience band members fled the stage and took refuge behind a rental truck, which was partially crushed by fans trying to escape the gas. The next day, Noel Redding announced that he had left the Experience. Concert setlist: Tax-Free, Hear My Train A-Comin', Fire, Spanish Castle Magic, Red House, Foxy Lady, Star Spangled Banner, and Purple Haze. Noel Redding recalled, "That concert almost killed us. Those big live events were also very scary. We gave a beautiful performance, perhaps too much so. The crowd went crazy. 30,000 fans wanted to go on stage with us. The police panicked when the crowd started moving en masse towards us, and I can't blame them. We weren't very calm either, but we continued playing, hoping that things would take a better turn." So, the police took out the tear gas, but since the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, towards the stage, the situation got even worse, and the members of the group were hit full-on by the tear gas. Coughing and barely seeing anything due to the burning tears in their eyes, the band looked for a way out, but the stage was now surrounded by a mass of fans. A large van was parked next to the stage by staff members who managed to take the three artists to shelter. The crowd did not give up and began to climb into the van, which began to shake, but fortunately the driver managed to start it and leave. Legend has it that some fans were still clinging to the van when the band got out to check into the hotel. In short, the last performance of the original Jimi Hendrix Experience lineup was certainly to be remembered both for the impeccable execution of their hits, as indeed the band did during every live event, and for the adventure it was to escape from that stage. The Denver Post headlined, "Throng Tear-Gassed. Festival Flap. 33 Arrested, 6 Hurt" by Richard O'Reilly. Policemen remove a youth from gas-shrouded south end of Mile High Stadium during early moments of disturbance Sunday. A 2-hour melee between police and potential gatecrashers of the rock music concert ended when the show's managers let the crashers in free. A second night of violence. Sunday resulted in thousands being tear-gassed, 33 arrests and 6 treated for minor injuries at Denver General Hospital. Ruckus outside Mars Music inside Stadium. Review by James Pagliasotti. The final 2 nights of the Denver Pop Festival were in marked contrast to the calmness of the opening night. While a lot of good music was being laid down inside Mile High Stadium, roving bands of potential gatecrashers clashed with police outside the stadium's south fence. Sunday night's event saw a 2.5-hour battle between the police and potential gatecrashers drain much of the pleasure from the fans gathered inside Mile High Stadium. The crowd inside for the most part was well-mannered and orderly, but distracted by the continual booming of tear gas canisters and firecrackers, which began shortly after a trio from San Francisco, finished a groovy opening set. The clouds of gas rose just beyond the south fence, throughout performances by Cleophas Robinson, Zephyr, and Three Dog Night. Consequently, the audience's attention was distracted. To say the performers bombed would be unfair, but they certainly didn't carry the evening. The gates were finally opened to the approximately 400 people outside the stadium, and a semblance of calm was restored. The spirit of the crowd was somewhat deflated, though, and a fine set by England's Joe Cocker was only mildly received. The long-awaited Jimi Hendrix Experience put the cap on the weekend with one of their usual out-of-sight performances. Hendrix gets more sounds out of a guitar than can be imagined, and puts them all together in a form that owes more to jazz than to rock. His sidemen, Noel Redding on bass and Mitch Mitchell on drums, jam in a kind of perpetual free-form accompaniment, providing as a trio what many consider to be the best group in rock music today. The final song brought the audience out onto the field, some dancing joyously, others content just to be near the experience. Then, with feedback still droning through the amplifiers, the group ducked behind the curtains, and the first Denver festival came to an end. It was, despite outside disruptions, an outstanding show in every respect. It was well organized, the sound was excellent, the audience was groovy, and the performers superb. Here's hoping more of the same will follow in coming years. Monday the 30th of June. Noel leaves the band. Noel stated, "I fled to England the next day. It was the end of the world as I'd known it for 3 hectic years. For the first time in 10 years, I stopped keeping my diary. That was the last show the Jimi Hendrix Experience ever played." When interviewed for Guitar Player magazine, many years later, Mitch had this contribution. "It's been well reported that there was a lot of tension in the Experience between Jimi and Noel. Jimi was starting to use other musicians, bass players among them, and had also recorded many of the bass parts on the Experience recordings himself. Plus, Noel wanted to write more for the group. There was a variety of issues. If Jimi and I presented anything in, say, a Motown style to Noel, he'd react negatively. At the time, the only music Noel listened to was 2 albums by the Small Faces. The Small Faces were great, but that's not where our heads were at." Noel had no knowledge of legendary R&B/soul bass player James Jamerson, or the guys that played with James Brown. The bigger problem was that he had no interest either. Billy, on the other hand, was a bassist. He had put the work in on the instrument. Noel, God rest his soul, had no interest in the bass as an instrument. While Hendrix author Charles R. Cross wrote, "Jimi said that the loss of Noel Redding was no great setback, but the record would indicate otherwise. Over the next 6 months, Jimi would play only 1 festival date, 1 free street fair, and 2 proper theatre concerts, by far the quietest period of his professional career. He still jammed in clubs occasionally, but even those appearances were more selected.